I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first and to the Greek. I'm Chad Davis, and this is Romans 1:16 Radio. All right, tonight we are in Daniel chapter 11. We've probably got two more sessions of Daniel, possibly three, probably two more. We'll talk about chapter 12, and then we're going to talk about eschatology and the end times and the things having to do with specifically the tribulation, but we'll lay out some broad lines just on the topic, but not until we finish studying the book. Daniel chapter 11 is probably the most difficult and the easiest chapter to teach. It's the most difficult if we try to get our meaning only from the pages of Scripture, which we really want to do that in the Bible as much as possible, right? We don't want to rely on commentaries or headlines because they'll steer us. Only thing is, this is predictive prophecy in chapter 11, and much of it, if not all of it, has taken place already, and it makes a lot more sense in the light of history. So it's very difficult if we read it and we ignore history and we just look at the text. Again, just to repeat myself because it's important. That's what you usually want to do. You want to let the text speak for itself and take its meaning alone before you try to synthesize it with your worldview. But this particular chapter is much harder to understand if we don't look at history right along with it. Okay, that's why your handout is a little diagram with a bunch of little blocks on it with the names of kings, because this chapter is full. I think the count is about 17 kings are mentioned in this chapter. Now, luckily, they're not mentioned by name, and we're going to see he and his kind of often, or the king of the south, even though that might refer to different kings across different decades, as you'll see as we go through here. So we're going to read it, and the first few verses are very easy, and then we're going to compare it to history and just talk about what happened and how this was fulfilled. Okay? The first verse, though, we'll remember before we read the first verse even, that chapter 11 is the middle of the message that this angelic being brings to Daniel. 10, 11, and 12 are one message from this angelic being. Daniel's out, and he sees the vision of this glorified being, this man that has on a linen garment and a belt around his waist of gold, and he's got face like lightning, and his eyes are like flame. Obviously, if you remember chapter 10, very imposing presence, and Daniel's weakened by being in the presence of this being, and hard for us to understand. But this, in verse 11, is part of the revelation that this messenger brings from God to Daniel. And it says, "As for me, in the first year of Darius the Mede, I stood up to confirm and strengthen him." Well, that really probably belongs in chapter 10, because he changes the subject in chapter 2, in verse 2, and really we should read that. In context with chapter 10, the last couple verses, because our verse numbers and chapter divisions are arbitrary. And this one's kind of unfortunately placed. Let me just read to you chapter 10, verses 18 through chapter 11, verse 1. "Again, one having the appearance of a man touched me and strengthened me. And he said, 'O man, greatly loved, fear not. Peace be with you. Be strong and of good courage.' And as he spoke to me, I was strengthened, and I said, 'Let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me.' Then he said, 'Do you know why I've come to you? But now I will return to fight against the prince of Persia, and when I go out, behold, the prince of Greece will come. But I will tell you what is inscribed in the book of truth. There is no one who contends by my side against these, except Michael, your prince. As for me, in the first year of Darius the Mede, I stood up to confirm and strengthen him." Well, there's some ambiguity grammatically. Who is the him? Is it Michael, the archangel, or is it Darius, the king? And Pat's got a firm opinion, and that's okay. You have a firm opinion, but I just want to ask the question because, well, it's possible that the messenger is strengthening and confirming Darius, and it's possible that the messenger is strengthening and comparing and confirming Michael, the prince, that messenger, that angel, that ruler, that spiritual being who's over Israel. Michael's going to come up again in chapter 12, but I'm with you, Pat. I think that this angelic being says he is confirming and strengthening Darius, king of the Medes. I'm sorry, king of the Persians. King of the Persians. That's what I think. And it's just my opinion. That there are multiple opinions out there. There's multiple opinions out there, you know. Verse 2, though, he changed the subject. He says, and now I will show you the truth. The main reason that the liberal scholars criticize the book of Daniel is chapter 11. We have to decide, is chapter 11 predictive prophecy, or is it the historical record written to look like it came down from an angel? And if it's written in, say, 165 BC, which is what the liberal scholars are going to say, they say the prophecies in chapter 11 are too accurate to have been written in the 6th century BC. They say there's no way that Daniel recorded the events of history this clearly without having known about them. Later on, they say there wasn't really a historical person named Daniel. They don't believe this book. But I want you to believe this book. It says right here, now I will show you the truth. The truth is, Daniel was a prophet that lived in the 7th and 6th centuries BC. He arrived in Babylon about 605, and by the time we get to the first year of Darius, it's about 538, 537 BC. That's 500 plus years before Christ. So what happens in this book, in chapter 11 even, may lead us right up to the 1st century in terms of kingdoms that surround Israel. Okay? Let's look at this. Behold, 3 more kings shall arise in Persia, and the 4th shall be richer than all of them. Actually, there were 6 kings, but 2 of them reigned for just a couple of months apiece, so they're probably not counted in the list. Right? You know, a couple of months and then assassinated or something. But the 4 would be Cambyses, and Cambyses is the Greek name for the guy who is the son of Cyrus, Cyrus the Persian. And then his son is Artaxerxes. And the next king is Darius the second. And the 4th one is a very famous king, Xerxes, also known as Ahasuerus. Now, by the way, would be a great time to read Esther. It'd be a great time to read Nehemiah and Ezra, because that's all contemporary with this time period right here. Okay? We won't get into that. It's outside the scope of our study. But those are the 4 kings, Persian kings, that are to arise. And listen to what they say about the 4th one. And the 4th shall be far richer than all of them. When he has become strong through his riches, he shall stir up all against the kingdom of Greece. So Xerxes, Ahasuerus, the famous king and general, decides that he is going to take over the kingdom of Greece. So Persia is Iran and modern Turkey in this area. The Persian kingdom is Babylon. So, you know, maybe like northern Syria. Yep. Yeah, Babylon is Iraq, yeah. So the Persian kingdom is all this. And to their north and west, off the coast of Turkey, is Greece. And they're rich. Greece is rich. They've got all this culture. They've got this money. And so there's a very famous battle where the Persians amass about 800,000 soldiers. And they are defeated in Sparta in the Battle of Thermopylae. Now, the Army studies this in military history. It's an amazing defeat. How did 300 men in Sparta hold off the hordes of Persia? And I don't know, 5-6 years ago, there was a movie called 300. It had some really offensive content in it. It was Gerard Butler, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. He played King Leonidas, who was the leader of the city-state of Sparta. And this is historical. We can date it very accurately, 480 BC. Maybe August, maybe September. But we know exactly when the Battle of Thermopylae was. So now, by the time you get into verse 2, we are at 480 BC. Okay? So Daniel's not alive in 480 BC. So one of two things happened. Either Daniel actually got a message from an angel that was predictive and accurate, and the key word is going to be truth, or somebody lived a lot later, like in the 2nd century BC, and wrote about history. But I'm not going with that. I'm going with Daniel was told that there would be 4 more kings, one of them would be rich, and he would stir up his nation up against the kingdom of Greece. Now remember, just right back at the last verse, or second to last verse in chapter 10, the angel tells Daniel, now I'm going to fight the prince of Persia. And when I go, what's he say? The prince of Greece will come. So these angelic beings that are somehow associated with or over the nations, this angelic being is going to go and fight against the Persian, I don't know, angel, demon, whatever it is. Fight against the Persian angel, for lack of a better word, for the Persian prince, that's what the word says. And then the prince of Greece is going to come. I'm going to say come into power, because it's exactly what happens. After Xerxes gets kicked out of Greece, he used to be the terror of Greece. They used to be frightened that the Persians would come and wipe them out, but they beat them, and so they became despised by the Greeks, and ultimately the Greeks took over the kingdom of Persia. And the gentleman who did that was named Alexander. Yeah, so now we know when that happened too. Alexander lived to be 33 years old. I think he was born somewhere around 356 BC, and then he died about 323 BC. I think that's about right. Put it in the 320s and we're correct. I might not get the exact year. I think 323 is right though. But so Alexander the Great is in verse 3. Then a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion and do as he wills. This is Alexander the Great, conquers the whole world. Now, this is not his first appearance in the book of Daniel. If you remember, he's the waist of bronze in chapter 2. Okay? If you remember, he is the leopard. Nope, not the leopard. I don't remember. The bear?
Goat. Was he the goat?
He is the goat in the third appearance. But the second vision is that the bear. The bear is Persia, and the leopard is Greece. Yeah, so he's the leopard in that second set of visions. But Alexander the Great, in a short span, from the time he's 30 to the time he's 33, he conquers the whole world. Except that the whole world is really not the whole world. It's the known world at the time. Okay? Don't let that bother you. Don't think about that too far. Don't start thinking about Noah and how much of the world's flooded, because there's just no end to that kind of debate. But we do know exactly how big Alexander the Great's kingdom was, and everyone there described it as the whole world. But I got to tell you, there were people up north in what is now Germany that he didn't conquer. Right? There were folks down in South Africa that he didn't even know about. But the known world, the Mediterranean basin, all the way out to India, it's a long way, all the way along the coastline of northern Africa and southern Europe, he's conquered this whole area. But then he dies. And it says, as soon as he has arisen, his kingdom shall be broken and divided toward the four winds of heaven. Now, what's that mean? Now, he died, and his kingdom was divided between his 4 generals. I'll tell you their names if I can remember them. Seleucus, Ptolemy, Lysimachus, and Cassander. Now, depending on what source you use and what language that source is based on, they may have different names if you're reading in a history book or you're reading someplace else. But those are the 4 guys who had different areas of the kingdom. And the main ones we're going to be concerned with for the rest of this chapter are going to be Seleucus and Ptolemy. Okay? And their children. But first, what happened to Alexander's children? Because it says, as soon as he's arisen, his kingdom should be broken and divided toward the four winds of heaven, but not to his posterity. So he has two children. You would think, if it goes like the rest of world history, one of those two children would probably be appointed the king. Well, they were murdered. Imagine that. One of them was named Hercules. The other one was named Alexander. And Hercules, I think, was 10, and Alexander was a baby, and they were killed. And the four generals, they took power. And on Alexander's deathbed, he was asked, this is legend, I don't know if it's true, and I wasn't there. Despite the white hair, I was not there. Alexander was asked, who will take over your kingdom? And he said that enigmatic phrase, to the strongest. So he knew that there would be conflict after he died. And there was. For a couple hundred years, there was conflict. So here we are in 323 BC. Alexander the Great dies, and his generals take over. And it says that it will not be according to the authority with which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up and go to others besides these. Besides who? Besides Hercules and Alexander, his children. So not only does his family not inherit the kingdom, it's divided up, and these kings don't have the level of authority that he had. There's intrigue, and there's war, and there's violence. And why do we care about that? Why does Daniel care about that? Because what we're going to call the kingdom of the north, the Seleucid kingdom, the one given to Seleucus, is Turkey and Syria and Iraq and Iran, using the modern country names, and Palestine, where Israel is. And the area taken by Ptolemy is Egypt and Cush and Libya and North Africa. Okay. So where is Israel? Right smack in between the kingdom of the north and the kingdom of the south. I went to Bible college in 1987, and I remember very well, I don't remember what class it was, but I remember in one class, the professor said, Israel was a political football that got kicked back and forth. And I think that's a really good illustration. The reason it was a problem, the reason it's of concern to Daniel, and this is a prophecy from the angel about his people, Israel, is because Israel is in between these two powers who are contending for power over the whole Mediterranean basin. Israel's right in the wrong spot. Like if I declared war on Pat and she declared war on me, and RJ decided he was going to park himself right in the middle, poor RJ is going to get some of it on him. Right? That's what's going to happen. If it's a food fight, he's going to get some in his hair. And that's what happened. Israel got some of this in their hair because the king of the south and the king of the north are battling for power, as we'll read. Okay? Verse 5. Then the king of the south shall be strong, but one of his princes shall be stronger than he, and shall rule, and his authority shall be a great authority. That's probably Seleucus. Nicanor is the conqueror. He is the first one. The one after him, I want you to pay attention to these Greek names. Antiochus the first, Soter. What does Antiochus Soter mean? Soter means Savior.
Yeah.
So, we hear this about, I'm not going to get on my hobby horse about the end times till later on in this hour. But I will get on the hobby horse in a little bit because I listened to several preachers on this week, and they couldn't stay in the BC. They had to go forward to the end times. They couldn't get it. They couldn't get it. But one of the things that's supposedly characteristic of the end times is that the man of lawlessness is going to make himself out to be God. Now, I want to tell you, that's something that was becoming very common in the ancient world. It started with the Greeks, with the Seleucids. They began to name themselves Seleucus Nicator, which is conqueror, from the Greek verb nikao, I overcome, the overcomer. Yeah, he overcame his rivals and became the king of this really vast kingdom. Then his his successor in about 281, he names himself Savior. He calls himself Antiochus I Soter, Savior. Guess what's next after that? Let me look at my ugly chart and see if I can see it. Okay, so maybe here, if you look right here on the ugly chart, the second column from the side, it says Seleucus Nicator. See him? Go down one, Antiochus I, Savior. Go down one more, Antiochus II, what's he call himself? Theos. It's the Greek word for God. So the idea that it's going to be a new thing when some ruler calls himself God, it's not a new thing. It's a Greek thing. It's a Roman thing. Okay? Those Roman emperors, from the time, as soon as the Senate was dissolved and they started installing emperors, the emperors demanded that they be worshipped.
Wow. So
And
he
in-
changed the name to God.
He did. This guy calls himself God.
Not the God, but God. Who was Shadrach, Meshach? What nationality were they? How come they just couldn't get a common, give us a name like we can pronounce?
Well, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are all Babylonian names, named after Babylonian gods. Those weren't their Hebrew names when they got there.
Right.
They were named that because they were not named for the God of Israel. They were named for Shak. Let's see. Abednego is named for Nego. Meshach is named for Shak also. Who is like Shak is what Meshach means. And Shak is a Babylonian god. Or so I read. I don't know. I wasn't there. But these guys, because they are drunk with power, they began to give themselves titles like conqueror, savior, God. See the escalation? I've got to be greater than my father was, so I'm Antiochus the third, Theos. Right? Okay. Back to the text here. The king of the south is not on this line. He is the Ptolemy is on the left side. Ptolemy. The first one calls himself, Ptolemy the first, Lagai Soter, Savior. Okay?
Is this the second?
The Ptolemy the second called himself Philadelphus, means he loves his brother. It means he loves his brother, which is not such a bad thing, I guess. But here we have the king of the south is strong, one of his princes is stronger, and he'll rule and have great authority. He expands the kingdom of Egypt. It wasn't called Egypt, but he expanded the kingdom of Egypt. And what did he do? He invaded Palestine. He invaded Israel. Okay? So in the next generation, there's supposed to be peace. Verse 6. After some years, he shall make an alliance. And the daughter of the king of the south, that's the Ptolemies, shall come to the king of the north and make an agreement. Now let me tell you about this agreement. So you got two kings, and they've been at war for 2 generations, right? Now we're looking at something like 247 to 222 BC. We're a few hundred years forward now. And we're tired of war, and we want to get along and not kill each other anymore. So I'll tell you what, king of the north, I'm going to send you my daughter, Bernice. And she'll be your wife, and that's how you know I'm not going to invade you and kill you. And it worked. This is a time-honored method that most of the time works. Solomon did it. He married the daughter of Pharaoh. If he marries the daughter of Pharaoh, what's that do? That pretty much ensures that Pharaoh is not going to attack him, at least as long as he's treating his daughter right. And that is...
How far down the line is she?
Yeah. Well, she's pretty high up there. Trust me, because she's the daughter of Pharaoh. So this is a good method. But here's the thing. Here's the problem. There's 2 problems actually. The first problem is that Antiochus II Theos is already married. And
So he's a bigot.
oh, worse than being a bigamist,
Yeah.
having more than one wife, or a polygamist. But David, lots of wives. Lots of wives. Solomon, more wives. Yeah, but
Then it was
not by the 200s. By the
Did they let him live?
So her name,
Did he get to live because he married the man's
yes,
daughter?
it worked for a little bit. So what what this Seleucid king, Antiochus II, does is he divorces his wife Laodice. By the way, you might recognize the name Laodicea. The city is probably named for her. Probably named after her. If the city already existed, he probably named it for her. Now, you look at where that city is. It's in Turkey. It's in part of the King of the North's territory, the Seleucid territory. But he divorces his wife, Laodice. Shouldn't have done that. Okay. So he marries Berenice. They have an infant son. All seems to be well. And then Ptolemy, the king of the south, he dies. And the next king comes along. So now, this guy's my hero here. Antiochus II, Theos, calls himself God, divorces his wife, and then changes his mind. And says, I want my old wife back. So he gets rid of Berenice, just distances her. And Laodice comes back into the palace, but she's not over it.
Oh, I bet she's not.
She poisons him, and he dies. She has Berenice and her infant son killed, and then she puts her son, Seleucus II Callinicus, on the throne. So as soon as the king died down there, the Berenice's father died. Well, the deal's off. Move her out of the bedroom into the guest room. Let me get my old wife back in here. And the old wife says, it's not going to play like this. She poisons him. He dies. She's mad.
Well, don't they have like back in don't when these kings or gods have cupbearer? Hello, get out of bed. Don't they have a cupbearer? Don't they have like huh?
Well, we know the Persian kings did. Because Nehemiah was a cupbearer to a Persian king. But I don't know about the Greeks. I don't know about the Seleucids. I don't know. But I do know that this kind of maneuvering did not pay off. Okay? And this is more turmoil for Israel. That's right. Better treat those women right. Now, let's keep reading here. Let's read what it says in the book. Let's read what it says in the book. Got to go back 2 pages because of that chart. And it says, after some years, they shall make an alliance. The daughter of the king of the south, just told you about this, shall come to the king of the north and make an agreement. But she shall not retain the strength of her arm, and he and his arm shall not endure. But she shall be given up, and her attendants, he who fathered her and he who supported her in those times. So the story behind that I just told you. Berenice, she says, okay, fine, I'll go live up there in the Seleucia, and I'll marry that king, and there'll be peace, and we'll have a baby, and it'll be fine. But as soon as her dad dies, she does not get, it was to say, she will not retain the strength of her arm. And he and his arm shall not endure. I don't know if that he is Ptolemy the father, or if it's Antiochus II Theos, the king of the north. But both of them end up dying. Verse 7, and from a branch, from her roots, shall arise one to take his place. That's her son she puts on the throne. And he shall come against the army and enter the fortress of the king of the north, and he shall deal with them and shall prevail. He shall also carry off to Egypt their gods and their metal images and their precious vessels of silver and gold, and for some years he shall refrain from attacking the king of the north. Then the latter shall come into the realm of the king of the south, but shall return to his own land. All right, though, there's war back and forth, suffice it to say. But the important thing here is that the Egyptian gods, their idols, let's say idols, were stolen. So when you go to war against a foreign country in the ancient world, there's no war crimes court, there's no Hague, there's no after action report. You plunder the nation. You take their stuff. You take their women, their children, their animals, their money, and you take their gods. This is a way of saying we have defeated not just you, but your gods. So the Egyptians are delighted when Ptolemy brings back the Egyptian idols back to Egypt, having taken them from the Seleucids. You see the animosity, and Israel's caught right in the middle. And when the multitude is taken away, nope. And he shall raise a great multitude, but it shall be given into his hand. And when the multitude is taken away, his heart shall be exalted. And he shall cast down tens of thousands, but he shall not prevail. For the king of the north shall again raise a multitude greater than the first. And after some years he shall come with a great army and with abundant supplies. So the king of the north, Seleucid, and I'm not sure how far down we are here, but we're not down to Antiochus Epiphanes. So we're probably looking at Antiochus the Great or Seleucid III Soter, who raises an entire army, goes to war against the king of the south, and loses. He loses an entire army. So he raises another army greater than the first, and this time he prevails. In those times, many shall arise against the king of the south. Now get this. And the violent among your own people shall lift themselves up in order to fulfill the vision, but they shall fail. Who is that? Israel. Israel says, hey, we're going to get on this train and go down with you and attack Egypt, the king of the south. But to no avail. But the angel tells Daniel ahead of time, your people are going to be involved. You're not innocent victims, not bystanders. Your people are going to be involved. And I think there's a price tag to pay for that later on. Then the king of the north shall come and throw up siege works and take up a well-fortified city. And the forces of the south shall not stand, or even his best troops, for there shall be no strength to stand. But he who comes against him shall do as he wills, and none shall stand before him. And he shall stand in the glorious land, that's Israel, that's the promised land, with destruction in his hand. And he shall set his face to come with strength of his whole kingdom. And he shall bring terms of agreement and perform them. And he shall give the daughter of women to destroy the kingdom, but it shall not be to his advantage. Who is the daughter of women? Her name is Cleopatra. Now I know where we are. We're in 205. But it's not the Cleopatra you know from the movies. That Cleopatra is a couple hundred years later. Okay? That Cleopatra is the girlfriend of Antony, a Roman, I forget what his rank is, general probably. And she is involved in political intrigue in the first century in Israel, which we'll leave that aside for when we study the New Testament. The king Archelaus, in Herod's family, Archelaus in the New Testament, Gospel of Luke, I believe he's her son or her grandson. I'm not sure exactly. But this Cleopatra is not. So again, the king of the south tries to get things worked out by sending his daughter over to Antiochus to be his bride. And let me find my place. He shall give him the daughter of women to destroy the kingdom. So he thinks that if I send my daughter over there to be his wife, I'll be able to manipulate and or spy and find a way. This isn't really a peace treaty. This isn't, hey, isn't my daughter beautiful? Why don't you take her as your wife and we can be friends? And we'll break bread together and there'll be no more fighting. He's thinking, no, I want my daughter over there to spy out what's going on, maybe poison somebody, maybe stab somebody, right? This is evil. But it shall not stand or be in his advantage. Afterward he shall turn his face to the coastlands and capture many of them. But a commander shall put an end to his insolence. Now, I don't have it because it's too much. But the historical record bears out every single one of these things. These things all took place with shocking veracity. So much so that people who don't believe the Bible say this cannot be written in the 6th century because it all happened. Historians who are not believers, they read this and they go, well, this is history. This isn't prophecy. This actually happened. Look, here it is, the record of it. I don't have it all, didn't bring it all, haven't read it all, but it's too much. But it's been proven over and over that these things have happened and they fulfill these words exactly. But when we get to verse 20, now we have a very important figure that we know a lot about and we're going to study in detail. Then shall arise in his place one who shall send an extractor of tribute for the glory of the kingdom. But within a few days he shall be broken, neither in anger nor in battle. In his place shall arise, here we go, a contemptible person. King James probably says vile person. Okay? So some translation says despicable person. This is a really strong word of disrespect. This is a person that we do not respect, okay? Contemptible person to whom royal majesty has not been given. He shall come in without warning and attain the kingdom by flatteries. I come in peace, I come in peace. Right? Now, all of your end timers that I listened to this week, they're like, this is the Antichrist. And they jump forward 2,500 or 3,500 or 4,500 years into the future. And I don't know where they think they can justify doing that. Because it just says right here, within a few days he shall be broken either in anger or about. Within a few days. It doesn't say within a few thousand years. Right? This is one right after the other. This is Antiochus. Huh? Yeah. Well, I believe it has a double meaning, they say. They believe it has double meaning. The Antichrist, and then they'll just go on and like, they'll describe to you that the Antichrist is like this because then they're reading what they get in this text. But I don't believe it has to do with any kind of end-time bad guy. It has to do with an old-time bad guy. And his name is Antiochus Epiphanes. Has anybody ever had a Jewish friend or known anything about Hanukkah? Okay, so Hanukkah is a festival of dedication. This got dedication, really rededication, because this guy Antiochus Epiphanes, we read in Maccabees a few weeks ago about his atrocities. This guy Antiochus Epiphanes, he outlawed the reading of the Torah. He burned the Torah scroll if he could find it. He outlawed the circumcision of babies. He tried to outlaw Judaism is what he did. He sacrificed a pig to Zeus Olympius on the altar in Jerusalem and took the guts of this pig and smeared it all over the inside of the temple. He defiled the temple, and he made Jewish people every month sacrifice a pig on that altar. Yes. And the ones who were willing to convert to worship his God, which we're going to read about in this text, the Jews who were willing to abandon the God of Israel and worship his God, Zeus Olympius, he gave them great financial rewards. Let's read. Okay. Armies shall be utterly swept before him and even broken, even the prince of the covenant. Who's the prince of the covenant? Well, in this case, it's Onias the third, and he was the high priest. And Onias was actually a legit high priest. He was from the family of Aaron. He was in a priestly line. He was supposed to be a priest. And I'm going to check a footnote and see if it says anything about that. But I think he was killed about 170. Let's see here. Where does it say this? Armies shall be swept away before him, even the prince of the covenant. Verse 22, do I have a note? I do have a note. It says, Antiochus the fourth Epiphanes, who is also the little horn of chapter 8, took the name Epiphanes, meaning manifest one. He killed Onias the third. I don't know about all the priests. He definitely deposed them. Now, he called himself Epiphanes, which means an appearance of God. It means like God in manifest. But the Jews, in their habit, they changed a couple of consonants to call him Epimanes, which means the madman. Because he was. Okay? Let me see if it says anything about Onias the priest here. Royal majesty obtained the kingdom by flatteries. I don't think it says anything here. But I believe his name was Onias the third. I think he was killed in 170 AD. And in 168 AD, I'm sorry, BC. 168 BC, Antiochus Epiphanes desecrates the temple. Okay? And he forbids the sacrifice. That's important in Daniel. Yes. Well, they call him that. Let's read it. Let's just read it all. Okay, here we go. Armies shall be utterly swept away before him and broken, even the prince of the covenant. And from that time an alliance is made with him. He shall act deceitfully and become strong with a small people. Without warning, he shall come into the richest parts of the province and do what neither his fathers or his fathers' fathers have done, scattering among them plunder, spoil, and goods. He shall devise plans against strongholds, but only for a time. He shall stir up his power in his heart, and against the king of the south with a great army. And the king of the south shall wage war with an exceedingly great and mighty army, but shall not stand, for plots will be devised against him. Even those who eat his food shall break him. His army shall be swept away, and many shall fall down slain. As for the two kings, Their heart shall be bent on doing evil. They shall speak lies at the same table, but to no avail. For the end is yet to be at the time appointed. And he shall return to the land with great wealth, but his heart shall be set against the holy covenant. And he shall work his will and return to his own land. Let me stop for now and talk about his attack on Egypt. He goes down and fights with Egypt, and it's a stalemate. So the king of Egypt, who is probably Ptolemy Epiphanes. No, it's got to be a little later, doesn't it? No, that's right. One of these Ptolemies sits down with him at a table, and they act like they've got a peace accord, but both of their hearts are deceitful. They never have any intention of making peace. It's a show, right? Suzanne and I, we sit down at a table and we say, hey, I don't have anything against you anymore. I don't have anything against you anymore. We're going to have peace. We're going to be friends, and I'll never come down here for war, and you'll never come up to me for war. And we hug and we kiss and we go separate ways. But in my heart, I'm like, I'm going to stab her in the back as soon as I can. And in her heart, she's like, I'm going to find a way to drive over him with a truck. That's right. This is really deceit. It's deceit, exactly. At the appointed time he shall return and come into the south, but it shall not be as this time as it was before. For the ships of Kittim shall come against him, and he shall be afraid and withdraw, and shall turn back and be enraged, and take action against the holy covenant. You got the KJV tonight, Pat?
Yeah, sir.
So does it say ships from Kittim or beyond Kittim?
Is that which verse? I'm sorry.
That is in verse 30.
Thank you so much. Let's go there. For the ship from Cyprus shall come.
Cyprus.
Therefore, Cyprus.
Okay, so the modern island of Cyprus is where we're talking about. And even though Antiochus Epiphanes is ruling and oppressing Israel, he's about to oppress them some more, from Jerusalem, that doesn't mean the Roman Empire doesn't exist yet. They're just not in power over Israel yet. So he goes down to make war against Egypt again, but this time he is met with emissaries in ships from Rome. I forget the guy's name. And the Roman messenger says to him that you're going to go back to Jerusalem and not invade Egypt. And he says, well, let me have until tomorrow to give you the answer about whether I will or not. So the Roman messenger draws a circle in the ground around him and says, I'll have your answer before you step out of this circle, or Rome will declare war on you. So he says, okay, fine. I won't invade. I'm going back home. So he goes back to Jerusalem, and he's super mad. And he takes it out on the Jews. That's the beginning of his terror campaign. Okay? So I was talking about Hanukkah, right? Let's read a little further, and we'll talk about Hanukkah. For the ships of Kittim shall come against him, and he shall be afraid and withdraw and turn back and be enraged and take action against the holy covenant. He shall turn back and pay attention to those who forsake the holy covenant. Forces from him shall appear and profane the temple and the fortress. There it is. And they shall take away the regular burnt offering. And they shall set up the abomination that makes desolate. That's sacrificing to Zeus. And he shall seduce with flattery those who violate the covenant. But the people who know their God shall stand firm and take action. So what happened? So the Maccabees.
I'm sorry. I'm just reading along.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of the name of the family. Anyway, I don't remember the name of the family off the top of my head, and I really should, and I'm embarrassed. And this is going to be on YouTube, and I won't know the answer. But, yeah, that's right. But his son, Matthias' son, Judas, is named Judas the Hammer. That's Maccabean. Maccabeus is the hammer. And the hammer, the Hebrew hammer. That's right. And the Maccabees overthrow the Seleucid king Antiochus Epiphanes. And he went to Persia, and he died. And he died. He went insane, and he died. Or he fell off an elephant, and he died. But he died. Say it again?
How did he die?
Don't know. There's a couple different stories about how he died. I like the he fell off an elephant.
And then he busted open, right?
No, that's Judas. That's Judas.
Oh, he busted open like a watermelon?
Yeah. But in any event, the people who know their God shall stand firm and take action. So the Maccabees, they drive him out. and they rededicate the temple.
They were rebels, weren't they?
Yes, they were. Well, because he was the king, so they were rebels, yes. And they overthrew him, and they cleansed the temple. They went and washed it up, and they had a ceremony of dedication, and that's what the Feast of Dedication is. And Jesus observes this Feast of Dedication in the New Testament. Now, this is not one of the festivals that God ordained or required in the law. It's just a remembrance of when Israel overthrew their oppressors and took control, and for a little while, about 100 years, they were independent of the Seleucid kings. Now, they were still kind of clients to Rome, although Rome didn't really take over Palestine until 63 BC. But we'll get to that when we get to it in the text. That's going to be verse 36. Let's keep reading. The wise among the people shall make many understand, though for some days they shall stumble by sword and flame, captivity and plunder. When they stumble, they will receive a little help, and many shall join themselves to them with flattery. And some of the wise shall stumble, so that they may be refined, purified, and made white, until the time of the end. For it still awaits the appointed time. There is going to come a time that is the end. Now, we always think that means the end of time, but it doesn't. It is the end of the nation of Israel as they know it. Israel now has overthrown the king of the Seleucid kingdom. But do they have a king? No. No. I believe the gentleman's name is John. Oh, here, I've got it right. I didn't have to guess. Matthias is right here. The Hasmonean dynasty. Matthias, son, Judas, and Simon, and John, they're all there. But I believe it's John Hyrcanus. Well, they install a new high priest. But this high priest, he's not of the proper lineage according to Leviticus. It's a political appointment. They don't have a king. That's key. They haven't had a king since Zedekiah. They were allowed to go back, but they were under the Persian kings when they went back. They were allowed to build a temple, but but the Persian kings permitted them, and Israel was a client state to Persia. And after Persia's destroyed, then Alexander the Great and later Seleucus and his descendants, they are a regime over Israel, and they try in Antiochus Epiphanes' day to destroy Judaism. But when they're driven out, God doesn't give Israel a king. Now, for the first time, and you still see this in the New Testament, Israel is really ruled by the high priest. Okay? Not by a governor, by the high priest. Now, the Romans come in 63 BC, so by the time we get to the time of Jesus, there was a Roman government in place and client kings underneath the Romans, like Herod the Great. But for a brief while, the high priest has all the authority in Israel. When we get into the New Testament, you'll see that the authorities underneath the Roman and Idumean government are the high priests. The Pharisees are not a priestly class. Sadducees. Sadducees are a priestly class, yes. And the high priest is the most important and most influential Jew in Jesus' day, right? That's who tries him. That's who he's brought before, the high priest. And not the king. Israel doesn't have a king. And they didn't have a king even when Antiochus Epiphanes had been overthrown for a little while. And it was a time of testing for them. Then verse 36, and the king shall do as he wills. I'll let you guess which king this is. The guys on the internet say it's Antichrist. We'll talk about that later. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god. Now, is that a surprise? Is that a surprise? These guys are naming themselves Savior, God.
The Roman emperors were building themselves like temples for you.
Menda, I love you, Menda. That's exactly right. It's the Roman emperor, right? And they magnify themselves above every god. And Caligula wants to set up his own. Caligula wants a statue of himself in the temple in Jerusalem. He doesn't get it, but he wants it, right? And he shall prosper until the indignation is accomplished. What's an indignation?
It's a trespass. No?
It's a shaming, right? When you were put It's a time of wrath, okay? And indignation is being put to shame. If you are being executed in the ancient world, you don't have a semi-private ceremony in a dark room, an electric chair, or a lethal injection. No, it's a very public display, and they strip you naked, and they spit on you, and they beat you up, and they kill you in public.
Just like they did at Jesus.
Jesus is a perfect example.
Wow.
It is a humiliation.
Right.
Man, this text, this angel is calling the Roman Empire an indignation against Israel. Let's read it again. He shall prosper, the king shall do as he wills. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and speak astonishing things against the God of gods. He shall prosper till the indignation is accomplished, for what is decreed shall be done. Israel is being abased, punished. They are under the Roman yoke now.
Wow.
He shall pay no attention to the gods of his fathers, or to the one beloved by women. He shall not pay attention to any other god, and he shall magnify himself above all. He shall honor the God of fortresses instead of these. That's the God of strength. How big is my army? The God whom his fathers did not know, he shall honor with gold and silver, precious stones, and costly gifts. And he will deal with the strongest fortresses with the help of a foreign god. To those who acknowledge him, he shall load with honor. He shall make them rulers over many, and divide the land for a price. This thing about okay, would you read verse 37 in the King James, please, Pat?
Yes, sir. He shall regard neither, excuse me, I'm sorry. He shall regard neither the God of his fathers, nor the desires of women, nor regard any God.
See, it says he will not regard the desires of women. Some people say, there's two interpretations. Yes, that's one. We're going there. There's two interpretations. Let's go with the easiest one. The modern culture won't be mad about. But this is the one that's kind of hard to explain. It is said, not by me, but it is said that in Israel, a woman hopes that her firstborn child would be a male child, because if it's a male child, then her son could be the Messiah. Right? And they're saying, well, he doesn't care about the Messiah. That's a Jewish interpretation. But the more easy to understand is that he was homosexual. At least one Roman emperor, at least two Roman emperors, Nero and Caligula, were blatant homosexuals. Nero was married to not one, but two men. Nero, when he found out his wife was pregnant, kicked her to death.
Kick the baby out of it.
Yep. And then he married a man. I've forgotten the man's name. I'm not really worried about it. But, yeah. Now, that's happening today.
So they met. He stomped her to death. He did. With that baby.
This is I'm not trying to talk about homosexuality. I'm trying to talk about the Roman emperor being the fulfillment of this scripture.
Amen.
Okay? It's pretty clear. Now, we're good. We're good. That's the part I want you to read.
Nothing new under the sun.
Nothing new under the sun, right? He shall deal with the strongest fortresses. Let's read verse 40. At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, but the king of the north shall rush upon him like a whirlwind. So Rome has to fight against Egypt and Seleucia, the king of the north, the Greek kingdom, right? You got to fight against them both. And they shall rush upon him like a whirlwind with chariots and horsemen and many ships. And he shall come into countries and overflow it, pass through. And he shall come into the glorious land, that's Israel. Tens of thousands shall fall, but these shall be delivered out of his hand. Edom and Moab and the main part of the Ammonites. Now, I wanted to do it, didn't have time to do it. But if you want to do it, you can do it. Go on the computer and go out and find you a map of the Roman Empire in 117 AD. You say, Chaplain, why 117 AD? Well, that's the height of the Roman Empire. That's as big as they got, 117. Emperor Trajan was emperor, as big as they got. And you will see that the Roman emperor goes all the way to Hadrian's Wall in northern England, just the southern border of Scotland. They couldn't conquer the Scots, so they built a wall. That's pretty far from Rome anyway. And it goes all the way out almost into Iran, but not quite. And then it comes down the Jordan River, and the little area which is now the country of Jordan. On the right-hand side, the east side of the Jordan River, is Ammon. As you go south, Moab. As you go a little further south and start to come underneath the sea there, you've got Edom. It says right here that Edom and Moab and the main part of Ammon escaped from the Roman Empire. And you will see that in 117 AD, the Roman Empire does not have Edom and Moab and Ammon as a part of it. Now, some of the maps are going to show kind of like a large area, and it looks like maybe they've conquered Edom and Moab. But most of the maps that you'll find will show what is now the country of Jordan on the east side of the Jordan River as not part of the Roman Empire. And they'll call it Nabatea, they'll call it Saudi Arabia, they'll call it Arabia, but it's not inside of the boundary of the Roman Empire. And that's why I'm absolutely sure that this is Rome. Because they do conquer tens of thousands, but these are delivered out of their hand. Edom and Moab in the main part of the Ammonites. And he shall stretch out his hand against the countries. The land of Egypt shall not escape. Nope. There was political intrigue. There was a war between Rome and an Egyptian city called Carthage. Hannibal was the general. And the Romans, although they lost a little bit, they ultimately defeated everything in North Africa and had this huge empire in 117 AD. He shall become ruler of the treasuries of gold and silver and all the precious things of Egypt. And the Libyans and Cushites shall follow in his train.
And that's Ethiopians.
Ethiopians and Libyans, yes. But news from the east and the north shall alarm him. Now, if you know about the reason that Rome fell, historians will tell you there was two reasons: moral turpitude and political intrigue being one. The country didn't have integrity; it fell apart from the inside. But the external reasons were to the north were the Goths, the Visigoths, and the Huns and the Vandals, these Germanic tribes that kept raiding down into the northern area of the Roman Empire. And so the Romans, what they would do is they say, well, we've got trouble on the northern border, so we're going to raid this territory. And they take over territory, and then they would worry about who's on the other side of the border, and so they would raid further. But there's a whole continent, or half continent above to the north of Roman Empire that's giving them trouble. And who's to the east of them? The Parthians.
Are they the ones that rode backwards on the horses?
They were the ones who, riding on their horses, had the skill to turn around and shoot arrows directly behind them.
Yes.
Yes, and some of the imagery in the book of Revelation probably refers to the Parthians. When talking about horsemen, we'll talk about that another time. But the two main threats to the Roman Empire were the Germanic tribes to the north and the Parthian Empire to the east. You say, well, the Romans, they conquered the whole world. Well, yeah, but there's a boundary to that part of the whole world they conquered. And if you go a little further to the east, to what is now Iran, what used to be Persia, the kingdom of Persia, there's a new kingdom there called Parthia in the first century. The Parthians are a feared enemy of the Romans. Romans are afraid of war with the Parthians. They avoid it. They avoid war with the Parthians. Did you see the movie with Gerard Butler? Another Gerard Butler movie. It's a Roman movie. What's it called? Gladiator.
Yeah.
So at the beginning of the movie, they're at war with somebody. Who are they? They are Germanic barbarians. Barbarian means uncivilized. And the Romans, they were pretty well cultured, and they had all kinds of architecture but the Germanic tribes were rather uncivilized, dressed in primitive clothing. But this is the problem with the Pax Romana, the Peace of Rome. The Peace of Rome is we'll kill anybody who we think might be a threat. But the problem is there's never any end to who might be a threat. So the real estate goes further and further. Well, ultimately, the Goths, Goths. No, I don't mean teenagers with a grumpy attitude and black fingernails. I mean Goths who came from Gotland, which is God's land, which was Sweden. They came from Gotland, which was to say, come from God's country, Sweden, and they came down into northern Europe, and then about 230, 240 BC, they split into two tribes, the Visigoths and the Ostrogoths. And there was some other dudes, the Vandals. And by the 4th century AD, after Christ, then the Huns had come from the east and taken over that whole northern Europe. The Huns. Attila the Hun? Heard of Attila the Hun? This is what Rome is worried about, and legitimately so. So let's look again at what the text says. But news from the east, Parthia, and the north, Germany, shall alarm him, and he shall go out with great fury to destroy and devote many to destruction. Rome says, I'm afraid of those people on the other side of this wall. So I'll kill them, and I'll take their land, and I'll put up a new wall. Now I'm worried about the people on the other side of this wall. So he goes, that's Rome, that's the peace of Rome, the Pax Romana, is they're gonna kill anyone that might be able to harm them. Will go out with great fury to destroy and devote many to destruction. He shall pitch his palatial tents, this matters to Israel, between the sea and the glorious holy mountain. Now, I'm not sure what sea that is.
Isn't that the Mediterranean?
Well, it could be. Could be the Red Sea, could be the Dead Sea, could be the Mediterranean Sea.
It did say the holy mountain.
But that's the point. That's Zion. That's the Temple Mount in Jerusalem.
So what sea would that be?
Well, there's 3 seas right there. There's the Mediterranean Sea, the big one. Then there's the Dead Sea that's just south of Jerusalem, a little bit east. And maybe it's a little further south on the way down to Egypt is the Red Sea that Moses crossed. So I don't know. But the point is, this touches Israel. It says, he shall pitch his palatial tents between the sea and the glorious holy mountain. Rome is going to occupy Israel. Did that happen? It happened. Now, even if you put this in 165, like the liberal scholars say, this still hadn't happened. Rome doesn't conquer Palestine until 63 BC. They don't conquer Israel until 63 BC. It's predictive prophecy anyway that you go.
Well, how many years? This is what I'm gonna ask, because we know that the Romans were the one that, well, they, they say crucified, helped crucify Christ. How many years was that, coming from, like you said, in this year?
Coming from when?
The time that Christ was crucified.
Well, I would say that verse 45 has to be 63 BC. Check it out. And he shall pitch his palatial tents. That's his royal presence. He's gonna pitch a tent for the king between the sea, probably the Mediterranean, Pat, because he probably came in on ships from Rome, and the glorious mountain. Yet his end, yet he shall come to his end with none to help him. It's an earthly kingdom. It's going to be destroyed. Flash back to chapter 2. Head of gold is Babylon. Arms and chest of silver is Persia. The bronze waist is Greece. The iron legs are Rome. And then comes the rock, the stone that was not cut with human hands. It's of divine origin. And it smashes the statue, and all the little pieces of the statue are blown to the 4 winds. And the rock becomes this great mountain that fills the whole earth. It's Christ.
Amen.
It's Christ. And you know what? These aren't just all the kings of the world. These are the kings of the world that are over Israel. Right?
Yeah.
The first king is the first nation. Actually, it's the second nation, but Judah is deported to Babylon.
Yeah. Right.
Right? And then after that, they fall under the Persians. The Persians are pretty good to them. They say, hey, go on back to Israel. Oh, well, Esther, she's beautiful. I'll marry her, and I'll spare her people, and I'm going to promote Mordecai. And the Persians weren't bad to Israel, but the Greeks were.
Yeah, they were.
Seleucus and his progeny were terrible to Israel. And after that, the Romans. And I think verse 45 gets us right up to 63 BC. So to answer your question, 93 years or 96 years before the crucifixion of Jesus.
Under 100 years.
Yep, gets us within 100 years. And that ends chapter 11. Are there questions tonight? A palatial tent? It's like a palace. It's a tent like a palace. It's a royal tent. Palace is the house where the king lives. The palatial tent is the tent that the king goes camping in, or when he goes on an expedition to a foreign country.
You know, nomad used to be Abraham, them and them too.
Get like a Winnebago. All right, it's a travel trailer. This is Royal Travel Trailer. It's Air Force One. Right? It's Air Force One. That's right. All right, God bless you. Pastor Clara, would you be so kind to say a word of prayer as we're dismissed?
Father, in Jesus' name, Lord God, we thank you for Chaplain Davis teaching the lesson